Wrapping up the third and final day of an historic trip to Iraq, Pope Francis holds a mass in the city of Erbil and visits parts of the country that were once in the hands of the Islamic State group. Iran releases the British-Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe from house arrest and removes her ankle tag. But there's confusion as she's summoned to appear in court next Sunday. Also coming up in the programme, Israel takes another step towards normalcy this Sunday. Restaurants, bars and cafes reopen their doors, but only to so-called green pass holders, with an estimated 40% of the population now vaccinated. Hello and welcome. You tuned into France 24. I'm Rochelle Ferguson. We are here with the headlines for you this hour. We begin this edition with some breaking news. The French billionaire politician Olivier Dassault has been killed in a helicopter crash. The eldest of Serge Dassault's 4 children. He was reportedly returning from a weekend in the French town of Deauville when the accident happened. Well, the helicopter pilot also died during the private flight. Taking to Twitter, the French President Emmanuel Macron praised Dassault. Have a listen.
Olivier Dassault loved France. He was a captain of industry, an elected official, and a commander of the French Air Force Reserve. All of his life, he never stopped serving his country, promoting its assets. His sudden death is a great loss. My thoughts go to his family and loved ones.
Well, we will, of course, be bringing you more on this developing story as the information comes into the newsroom. Next for you, wrapping up the third and final day of a landmark trip promoting peace in Iraq, Pope Francis held a much-anticipated mass in the city of Erbil. The 84-year-old pontiff gave the sermon at a sports stadium in front of thousands. He was warmly welcomed as he travelled round the running track beforehand in his Pope-mobile. Here he is in Erbil speaking about the importance of unity nationwide.
Prego perché I membri delle varie comunità religiose, insieme a tutti gli uomini e donne di buona volontà, cooperino per stringere legami di fraternità e solidarietà al servizio del bene e della pace.
Well, let's get you more on the Pope's visit, that 3-day visit then in Iraq. Ramazan Kiln is the Associate Professor of Political Science. He's also the Director of Islamic Studies at the University of Nebraska. Ramazan, thanks very much for speaking to France 24 this evening. The Pope then rounding off which has been clearly an historic visit, the first papal visit ever to Iraq. I'd like to kick off with your reaction to this trip aimed at promoting peace and tolerance against amongst ethno-religious groups.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. Yes, this was indeed an important trip, despite there were some security and health concerns around the trip. The Pope pursued his willingness to pursue, realized his long-held willingness to visit Iraq. It was important on a few reasons, I think. As you mentioned, Pope, as he always likes to give the message of unity and reconciliation, Iraq was a good place to do so. First of all, especially after 2003 Iraqi war, there was an unleashed cycle of conflict for several years in Iraq. So it influenced all the populations in the country. We have seen conflict among different sects, Shia-Muslim conflict, also. The Christian population has also been influenced a lot from this. Their population today is about 1/4 of what it was before the war, because there was also the ISIS, the rise of ISIS in 2014. So he wanted to somehow give a message to them, but also to the Iraqis, to glue the bonds between them and the Iraqis. And second,
my question to you, Ramazan, my question to you would be about the efficacy of this visit. Is it more symbolic, or is this a visit that can actually set the wheels in motion and move towards change in Iraq when it comes to interfaith?
Okay, thank you. I think there are symbolic and some efficacy things. First of all, the meeting with El Sistani is important because he's an important figure in Iraq, and he can have impact over Iraqi politicians, especially those coming from Shia background, which constitute the majority. So the message that he gives about unity of Iraqis and also the message that he can give about Iraq's Christian minority is important. So I think in that regard, we can see some efficacy. In terms of interfaith relations, I think it's symbolic, but I think it shouldn't be overlooked because he visited Ur, the birthplace of Abraham, who is considered as an important figure for all monotheist, the three great monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But in terms of political issues on the ground, of course, his impact is limited because the problems that we see in the region are not necessarily related to the lack of interfaith understanding, but mostly we have lots of economic, political, social problems. So, of course,
let's talk more about those political.
To expect that this can be, yeah.
Let's, Ramazan, if you will, let's talk a little bit more about those political issues, because when it comes to political arrangements in Iraq, would you say that there's a wide range of ethno-religious groups essentially involved in key decision making in Iraq, or is there work to be done?
Of course, it's a very challenging work, and the recent history is actually a great witness to that. We have, since Saddam Hussein was a dictator, we all know, but after his overthrown from ruling Iraq, we have seen lots of conflicts because of the ethno-religious and ethno-national diversity that you have been talking about. Of course, it's not easy because on the one hand, we see a conflict between Iraqi central government and the Kurds on the north, Kurdish regional government. On the other hand, even within the north, we see lots of internal dynamics within each group. So of course it is very difficult to bring Iraq together back again. But I think there have been some promising signs as well. For example, last year, or October 2019, we have seen protests which were actually led by the Shias who were in the southern parts of the country. Shias actually are ruling the country. So the people went out to the street not because of their ethno-religious differences, not because of religious or ethnic differences, but because very real problems, economic problems, issues around freedom, discrimination, and so forth. I think the discourse in Iraq is shifting from identity to more real problems that we see.
Okay.
There are pro-democratic institutions, so it will hopefully make some change in the recent future.
Okay, Ramazan Kilnik, you're Associate Professor of Political Science, Director of the Islamic Studies Programme at the University of Nebraska. Thank you for speaking to France 24 today. In other news, Iran has released the British-Iranian aid worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe from house arrest this Sunday, also removing her ankle tag. Now, the 42-year-old has been summoned to appear in court next Sunday. Zaghari-Ratcliffe was arrested in Tehran back in 2016 on spying charges, allegations which she denies. Bringing us up to date is France 24's Catherine Kadir-Clifford.
A symbolic step for Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe as her ankle tag is removed, marking the end of her 5-year sentence. Though Iranian authorities stopped short of allowing her return to her husband and young daughter in the UK. Her employer spoke to her following the news.
She was anxious, but she was relatively in good spirits. She's able to leave her house, but she's not able to board a plane and come back to London tomorrow. She doesn't have her passport.
Iranian British national Zaghari-Ratcliffe was arrested in 2016 on spying charges whilst on holiday in Iran. She was later convicted of plotting to overthrow the clerical establishment. But the ordeal is not over. She now faces another court appearance next Sunday on separate propaganda charges.
I don't know how to interpret being summoned next Sunday. Is it that they're going to just finish off all the paperwork and release her and give her passport back, or is it that they're going to whack her with that second sentence? We don't know, and I think there's a few more sleepless nights ahead of her.
Zaghari-Ratcliffe's husband maintains she's being used as a pawn in a diplomatic dispute between London and Tehran. UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab pledged to continue the fight to bring her back.
Iran continues to put her and her family through a cruel and an intolerable ordeal. She must be released permanently so she can return to her family in the UK.
Gary Ratcliffe served most of her sentence in Tehran's Evin prison, where she described inhumane treatment and conditions before being released last March during the pandemic and kept under house arrest.
Next, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Israel has taken another step towards normalcy this Sunday. Restaurants have reopened their doors, as have bars and cafes, to vaccinated so-called Green Pass holders. An estimated 40% of Israel's population has been inoculated against the coronavirus. Claire Rush brings us up to date.
This Tel Aviv cafe is back in business. As Israel further eases its third lockdown, restaurants can now resume indoor dining at 75% capacity, with tables 2 meters apart, delighting customers and employees alike.
I'm very excited that things will go back to normal.
Because of the reopening of the seating and the restaurants, people can sit here and enjoy their coffee.
Among those enjoying the newfound privilege, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Restaurants coming back to life. We still have to watch ourselves. We have to wear masks, keep the distances that people require, but social distance. But we're coming out of it.
There is a catch, however. Indoor dining is only available for those who have a so-called Green Pass, a certificate proving full vaccination or recovery from COVID-19.
We're asking every guest that we have here if he had the vaccine.
Green Pass holders can now also attend bars and large events like concerts, adding to the list of places reopened for the fully vaccinated, such as gyms, hotels, and pools. Sunday's additional easing of restrictions comes amid Israel's mass vaccination campaign. Nearly 40% of its population has been fully immunized in just over 2 months, making the country a world leader in vaccinations per capita, thanks in large part to an arrangement with Pfizer, allowing it to obtain large quantities of doses in exchange for the sharing of medical data on the product's impact. While Israel has been hailed for the speed of its vaccination drive, it's also faced criticism for providing few vaccines to Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu is focusing on the rollout in his campaign, the Israeli premier facing a tough re-election battle in what will be the country's 4th parliamentary elections in 2 years.
Well, there you have it. You are very much up to date. Stay tuned here on France 24. More international headlines coming up for you shortly.